So welcome everyone, welcome. Many of you have not been in this kind of environment before for what we call sesshin, which is a Japanese word which means to unite the body and mind. And I would call this sesshin light, kind of doing an easy intro sesshin. The irony about the phrase sesshin is that your mind and body are, of course, already united. So to say I'm going to unite my body and mind is like saying I'm going to turn my eyes blue. And they're already blue, but maybe I don't realize they're blue. So it's to more experience the inherent unification of body and mind. And also, by the way, you're also inherently enlightened. I don't know if you knew that or not, but that was one of the fundamental teachings of the Buddha, is that just as you are in all of your catastrophe, you are enlightened. You are the perfect manifestation of you. So our practice is not about becoming enlightened. Our practice is about realizing our enlightenment, embodying our enlightenment, manifesting our enlightenment. And I have two what's called Dharma successors, which means two people that I've empowered as teachers, and many of you know Mushin, who's one of those two, and he likes to say that this whole practice of enlightenment is kind of like if you start 100 feet away from something and then you move half the distance toward it, and then you move half the distance toward it again, and then again and again. You're getting closer and closer to it, but the thing about that little mathematical brain teaser is what? You never actually get there. So I would say that I am living my life in a more awake or more enlightened way than I used to, but I'm not certainly there all the time. You guys could ask Maureen if you don't believe that. But the idea of the practice is to experience our own goodness, experience our own enlightenment. As my teacher Dainin Roshi likes to say, to become better friends with yourself. As the root teacher in our lineage, Maizumi Roshi used to say, to appreciate our life. Our life is extremely important. In Buddhism, we recognize precious human birth because the teaching is that humans are the ones who can wake up or who can recognize our own awakeness. Animals are kind of locked in, you know? The reason why we love our pets so much is because they're very simple. Our pets want love and food and shelter, and that's pretty much it. They're not trying to create a treatment center. They're not trying to get Dharma transmission. They're not trying to place a client with a difficult mom. Our lives are more complex. Also, we don't know this for a fact, but we assume that we are aware of our mortality in a way that presumably animals are not. We have an 11-year-old dog who she's on the back nine for sure, maybe playing her last couple holes. She's got arthritis in 2 of her 3 legs. You heard that right. So she has 1 working leg. One's gone, 2 have arthritis, and she still has really good quality of life. And of course, Maureen and I adore her. And we want to keep her around as long as we can, but our commitment is only as long as she has quality of life. We're not going to put her through any unnecessary pain and suffering. We're not going to put her through any complex surgeries. We're not going to do that. We're going to let her go when it's clearly time. To the best of our knowledge, she has no concept of any of those conversations happening. She's just in the moment. Must be nice. But the problem with that kind of being in the moment is a certain level of ignorance as to what's going on, which, animals have that luxury. The problem with being a human being is that we understand karma. We understand that our past influences our present. We understand that the present influences the future. We understand that we're going to die, at least in theory. We understand that. If this were a really formal sesshin, we would be sitting well into the evenings. And there's nothing quite like this room when it's dark and it's full of Buddhas practicing their enlightenment together. Right?
It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. You're all welcome to be here at 5:30 a.m. tomorrow if you want. I will not be here, but I'm sure Ryan can let you in because he'll be here, right?
I can.
But at the end of the day, sesshin days are typically starting around 5:30 in the morning and typically ending around 9 in the evening. And at the end of the day, there's an admonishment, which is, it goes like this. It's called the Evening Gatha. It goes, "Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken, take heed, do not squander your life." So I'll just repeat that. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken, take heed, do not squander your life. So my hat is off to all of you because you're choosing to be in here right now. There's a lot of other things that you could be doing rather than spend all day in the Zendo sitting with yourself. It's not the most entertaining thing to do unless, well, for some of us, maybe it is. Probably depends on your given level of mania on a given day. It could be very entertaining to sit with yourself all day. But for most of us, it's very physically challenging. It's uncomfortable. It's, I was talking with one of you in Dokusan about a lot of inner child work happening and a lot of things surfacing from when we're younger. It's not always super pleasant. Another well-known teacher in our lineage, Joko Beck, who used to live right over in Prescott, she used to say the only thing worse than doing sesshin is not doing sesshin, because it's not super comfortable always. But the alternative is to not do it and not look at ourselves and not experience the deep peace and connection with each other. And that's a shame, because then we're not really fully experiencing our life. So, as of yesterday, I had no idea what this Dharma talk was going to be about, which is very on brand for those of you that have heard me give talks before. I was known at one time to ask in the morning, what would you all like me to talk about this afternoon? And whoever had the best idea, I would just do that. I'm not really a planner when it comes to these talks, but I almost actually texted both of you, what should I talk about? Well, the gentleman on the shrine made that decision for us. For those of you not aware, his name's Adam, and was a friend of many of ours and a colleague of many of ours, and a really lovely person who had a lot of trauma and a lot of struggles and a lot of challenges in life, as many of us, if not all of us in this room do. No one ends up at Red Mountain because things went well. No one ends up becoming a therapist because your life went so great and you never required any therapy. Every single therapist will tell you they became a therapist because therapy helped them and they wanted to help people. Nobody jumps into the work of marketing programs, trying to place students in programs because they think that'll be like the easiest possible way to make a living and the easiest on your heart and the one that'll keep you in the most regular hours, right? We're all here because we had some suffering of some kind, and most people are not Zen students either. I'm certainly not a Zen student because I had no suffering in my life. I'm a Zen student because I was miserable and I was trying to find something that might help me feel better. I found that meditation helped. So Adam was a psychologist, and like all of us, I'm not going to get into his story because it's not my place, but some of you know, he had a lot of things go on in his life that led him on his path. And he was a very sweet and kind and loving person who was also fairly tortured, as again, many of us are. So when I found out yesterday that Adam had passed away quite suddenly, it just became very obvious what I wanted my talk to be about. What I want my talk to be about is that this thing that we are doing, called life, is very finite. And it's really hard for us to get that. I don't get it a lot of the time. I don't go to sleep hoping I'll wake up in the morning. Now, at an earlier time in my life, I probably would go to sleep wishing that I would not wake up in the morning, but that's a separate talk. These days, I hope I will wake up, but I don't even think about it. I just assume I'm going to be here. Just assume I'll be here. And I can't really describe what it's like to come on this campus now since I retired. And Cynthia said something really sweet to me. Is it okay if I say what you said earlier, which is that it was very brave of Maureen and I to retire. And I had not thought about it that way at all. I think what you meant is that it's such a huge change in your identity, and it's such a leap of faith to entrust something that you've built to others, to let go of control, to let go of feeling important, to let go of being needed. I was also talking earlier with one of you about that, being needed. But I didn't really think about it as being brave because I have so much faith in the people that are still here. And obviously the broad-shouldered gentleman to my left is the one who's now Atlas holding up this particular little world. But you and you and you and many, many, many others, as well as all of you who are students, and you're still here for another few weeks, right? All of you guys are holding it up, and I knew that they would, and I knew that I was really done. So I didn't really think of it as brave in that sense, but I do appreciate, I suppose it's brave to recognize things have changed and to accord with that and not fight it. To let go. Thank you. But I got to tell you guys, when I come back on this campus now, I think I feel even more proud than I did when I was the executive director. I mean, to build something like this with blood, sweat, and tears and then have it still be here and still feel good, feels good. And to meet people whom I've never met who are clearly getting so much out of it is really special. And it really makes me proud, and I know those of you that are working in this field feel that same pride and sense of accomplishment and sense of like, I know my life means something and matters. And those of you that are younger in the room and haven't had that path forged yet, I would wish that for you when you're our age, to feel like what I did mattered and made a difference. And Adam's life mattered. And he made a big difference in my life, and a much bigger difference in a lot of other people's lives. I've heard some stories the last couple of days that he was too humble to have shared. He wasn't someone that would do something nice for someone and then run and tell another person hey, did you hear what I did for Aaron? Like, that wasn't his vibe. Our life really matters. I had a professor in college who taught me creative writing, and he was a really important mentor for me, a guy named Doug Smith. And one of the things he liked to say was, when it's all over with, your entire life boils down to a hyphen between two numbers. And everything you did is contained in that hyphen. Everything. Isn't that wild? By the way, this is not a morbid Dharma talk. This is meant to be a very inspiring Dharma talk. Enlivening, not just enlightening. It really matters. It matters what you do. It matters how you choose to spend your time. There's a modification of the evening gata that some Zen centers use, not all of them, that at the very end says, like fish in only a little water, what comfort can there be? Which again is not supposed to be a bummer. It's supposed to be a reminder, a motivator. A fish swimming in the ocean is probably not quite as alert as a fish swimming in a little water. And Adam, I think we all would agree, died too young. I don't know. Do you know exactly how old he was?
39.
That's much too young. So contrast that with my father-in-law, who died a little over a year ago. He was 89. So he had 50 more years. Got an awful lot done in that 50 years. He came over to the United States from Ireland with literally nothing except a college education, having been recruited by one of Howard Hughes's lieutenants. For those of you that don't know who Howard Hughes was, there's a very entertaining Leonardo DiCaprio movie you can watch. But this guy, according to the lore, encountered Patrick. Patrick was working as a riveter at a factory. He was a professional soccer player whose career had just ended. And this guy struck up a conversation with him and decided that he was too smart to be a riveter at a Hughes factory in Ireland, and that he should come to the United States and work for this guy and get taken under his wing. So he left his father and his 5 sisters and everything that he knew and came over here and proceeded to not only leave Hughes Aerospace, go on a spiritual quest, live at a monastery with Thomas Merton for a couple years, leave that, go work at Bell Helicopter, where he helped design the bulletproof glass on the Huey that was used in the Vietnam War. Left there, eventually went to Ball Aerospace, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this. He led the team that designed the booster rockets on the space shuttle. No big deal. And I had the incredible privilege of being with Patrick when he died. And he did not have any regrets at all. That's a pretty legendary life, you know? My dad, for that matter, grew up dirt poor in rural Mississippi and became a very renowned author. Not to mention a Rhodes Scholar and a Phi Beta Kappa Harvard graduate. He also produced a couple of kids that are all right. Hi, Dad. These are extraordinary lives. And the challenge, of course, is that if you're an anxious person, you might be so afraid of your own death and so preoccupied with your own death that you can't function, and that's not what we're going for. To circle back to Thomas Merton, who was a very famous Christian mystic, who was my father-in-law's spiritual director for a while, the Mystic swims in the water that drowns the insane. You might have an experience of oneness, of interconnectedness with everything. That's quite powerful. Maybe you've had one today sitting in here. Lots of meditation is a good way to experience that. But hopefully, when it was over, you were like, oh, I guess I should go eat a sandwich, right? Because if you can't get out of that place of everything is one and everything's interconnected, and it's not important that I go to the bathroom because it's all one. It's all good. Well, there's lots of hospitals that are full of people that are stuck in that experience of oneness, and someone else needs to change their pants for them several times a day because they can't get back into the relative world, right? So walking that line between the relative and the absolute, being able to experience things more than ourselves, but also come back to ourselves, is kind of the trick. Being able to feel elation and joy, and to be able to feel the depths of your misery, and to be able to ponder your own death and give gratitude for your life, but also just kind of, car battery's dead, better go down to the shop and deal with it, right? To live an ordinary life. That's a very tricky balance, isn't it? Very tricky balance. In Zen, we have a saying, to be a true person of no rank. Why is my rakusu brocade and the rakusu I'm giving to Mike tomorrow black? Do you know?
Because I'm not a Roshi.
Right, because you're not a Roshi. That's correct. Another of my teachers that I was lucky to encounter, Jitsudo Sensei, I remember one time, or Roshi when he died, he was wearing his black rakusu during a retreat when we were doing work practice, and I was so struck by that because I'd never seen a teacher wearing their black rakusu. That was for us plebes. I was like, what? And he said, well, it's still my rakusu. I asked him about it. I was like, I've never seen a teacher wear their black rakusu. He's like, I have a lot of rakusus. This is my black rakusu. I like to wear it when I'm doing work. The rakusu is meant to show that if you're in a Zen center and you see someone wearing a rakusu, that you can ask them for help. They know enough about what's going on in the Zendo that the teacher has seen fit to give them the precepts. And their commitment is such that they have asked to receive the precepts. So they're there to help. That's really what it means. But I've been in a lot of Zendos where the rakusu havers were a bit, let's just put it this way. If you didn't notice their rakusu, they would probably tell you about it. And then when you start to really get somewhere, you get a purple rakusu, which means you're a Hoshi, an apprentice teacher. Then when you receive Dharma transmission, you get a brown one. And then when you become a Roshi, you get a brocade one. And your fashion sense can really start to show because you get to pick your brocade rakusu. Every brocade rakusu is different. But an ongoing kind of conundrum in my life is how do I be a good Zen student, stay open to learning, and be a true person of no rank. Just a normal guy, go to the grocery store, pick up my prescriptions. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you, normal person, not pretentious. And yet, be able to come up on the high seat, wear the brocade rakusu, and give a talk. That's a responsibility. I can't just mail that in. When we're in Dokusan, it's important. You guys are talking to me about important things. You're being vulnerable. It's important to give you the best of me in that. So how do you, whatever role you're in, everyone in here is in some role somewhere in your life where you have more power than the other person. So how do you wield that skillfully? How do you be a true person of no rank and be responsible for yourself. How do you, in Patrick's case, be a Benedictine monk who then becomes a very successful business person and rocket scientist? One of the things I loved about him was that he would just, those of you that knew him, you remember. What was he like?
He was the most non-pretentious person I have ever met.
Yeah.
Kindest, most loving heart.
Non-pretentious.
Non-pretentious.
And going back to my dad too, like the one word that is most often used to describe my dad is kind. And you'd think, Rhodes Scholar, famous author, people walk up to him with satchels full of books they want him to sign. He told me about recently at a conference that this guy, he described the guy's bag as like a clown car. He was like, I figured he couldn't have any more books in there, but he kept bringing another book out, another book, and another book, and another book. Right? How do you be very accomplished and also be very humble? It's not about being one or the other. You might as well be accomplished. You might as well be the best at what you do. You might as well take advantage of this precious human birth that you have. And not only do you have precious human birth, you also have exposure to the Dharma. The odds of that are extremely low. Most people in the world do not get exposed to the Dharma. I feel extremely fortunate to have been exposed to it, because I don't know if I would still be alive or what my life would be like if that hadn't happened. And we were just talking earlier about Dr. McGinn over at Treehouse in Prescott. Many of you know Molly. And Molly, when I was having this idea about Red Mountain and I was using subjective language like, well, if we do Red Mountain, well, if I can get Red Mountain going, if. And we were having lunch, and Molly is, to use your word, an extremely brave person. She will say what she thinks. She's not here to pull punches. And if she thinks that you are selling yourself short, you're going to hear about it. And I will never forget her fixing me with her stare that you don't dare break and saying, why do you keep saying if? Why do you keep saying if? She said, you should be saying when you do Red Mountain, when Red Mountain is open, when. She said, let's assume the train has already left the station and it's headed your way. What would you do? How would you get ready if you knew Red Mountain was going to happen? You knew it for a fact. That conversation changed my life. What would you do if you knew that whatever it is you're wishing for, seeking, moving toward, it was going to happen? The relationship was going to be at a new place. The career was going to be at a new place. Your spiritual life was going to be a new place. Like if you knew that was happening, how would you behave? That's called manifesting. And listen, I'm not saying that all of our dreams are ever going to come true. Like I'm not going to play in Major League Baseball. First of all, I'm about to turn 48, and that's not a thing unless your name is Nolan Ryan. Secondly, I wasn't good enough. I was good enough to lead the Framingham Babe Ruth League in home runs twice. I wasn't bad. I just wasn't good enough. I'm not saying, we're all going to be president one day. I'm fairly sure Hunter is, but that's a different topic. But I have learned not to place limits on life. Like if you'd have told Maureen and I 18 years ago when we were separated that we were going to have this loving, trusting, beautiful relationship we have that is literally deepening all the time, I would have said, no, I don't think so. I think we can get to a better place, but I would never have dreamed this. We are literally right now sitting in a physical representation of an idea that Maureen and I had on our third date. And now we're putting energy into other things that maybe in a few years we'll have another conversation about. Just don't sell yourself short. Don't sell your life short. One of the really cool things about Red Mountain is it's actually gotten better since I left, because I was really fried. And this amazing human to my left is 10 years younger than I am, and he has more energy than I do. He's also ambitious as hell. And when I was here, he couldn't put a lot of his ideas into motion. Because as much as I appear to be a bit of a wallflower sitting up here, I actually have a very big personality. I'm not sure you all knew that. I had to get out of the way. And it is better since I left. I mean, I feel it. I see all the new ideas. I see all the new things happening. And thank you again, by the way, for taking on this best and worst job in the world. Right? Depending on the day. Sometimes in the same day.
Yeah.
But the point is that whether you have an experience like Adam, where I don't know what his last moments were like or what he experienced, but my guess is that he was not planning for or aware of his death. Or like Patrick, who was very much planning for and aware of his death. It is going to happen, for sure. And again, that is not a bad thing. That's not a morbid thing. That's not a let's get paralyzed in panic and fear because we're all going to die. That's a wow. Just like every other carbon-based life form that has ever taken existence, trillions upon trillions of them in this world, we will eventually cease to be in this particular, as yet another of my teachers so poetically put it, bag of skin. So what are you going to do about it? And again, this is not to make you grandiose, to go, well, I know that I'm going to die, so I'm going to go do crazy things. That's not what I'm saying. And it's not to make you impatient. You know, it takes X amount of time to get a bachelor's degree. It takes X amount of time to get a master's degree. It takes X amount of time to get a black belt. It takes X amount of time to study Rakusu, right?
Some longer than others.
That wasn't meant as a barb. It was meant just to say it takes time. It takes time to become a Roshi. But I'll tell you guys, when I was coming up before I became a teacher, my teachers told me over and over and over, I have nothing to give you. I have nothing to give you. You already have it all. And I would play along, but more or less my internal experience of that was, so give it to me. We have about 600 koans in our particular canon. Koans, for those of you that don't know, are these best described as these paradoxical riddles that we sit with that result in an expansion of our consciousness as we ponder them. The most well-known one in the Western vernacular is if a tree falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? That is actually a real koan. But my teachers also used to tell me, Dainin, my Dharma name, sooner or later there's no koans, there's only your life. Apply the koans to your life. Treat your conundrums and your problems like a koan. And I would play along and I'd go, oh yeah, So did I get that one right? Can I go on to the next one? And those of you that are doing koans with me know that there's always a little dopamine hit when your teacher says, go on to the next one. Oh, yay, I'm smart, I'm good, I'm worthy, I did it, yay, go on to the next koan. Good Zen student. But like any random reward system, there's also an addictive quality to when you get it wrong. Because then you're like, well, I'm going to show him, I'm going to get this koan. I'm going to sit the shit out of this period. I'm going to get that koan. And let me tell you, once you get to the other side, it's so embarrassing because you go, oh, what do you know? I'm on my own, as it turns out. I still have to deal with all of my stuff. I did have it all along. I just didn't realize it. I needed their help to realize it. And my life is one big koan after another. What do I do about the fact that my car won't start? Do I leave Maureen stranded or do I deal with it and be 15 minutes late? That was my koan this morning. How do I be the teacher at a meditation retreat while getting ready to go out of town on Friday, while dealing with the fact that my heart is profoundly broken right now? Because this is not the first thing that's happened in the last 4 months. It's been challenging for me. You know, it's the old, you and your partner retire from this thing you've poured your entire life into for 10 years, and then all of a sudden they have cancer. It's that old thing. You guys have heard that one, right? And thank goodness she's okay, but I'm exhausted. You guys know, like, after you have a hysterectomy, you can't lift anything. It's like living with someone who has no arms. So if you can imagine that, it's not her fault. I'm not saying it in a mean way, but like, who's going to lift up the old dog that can't lift herself? Well, me. Who's going to bring in the packages, put out the packages, the Amazon return, the dog food, the groceries? Me. Well, that was tedious. That was difficult. Much harder for her, mind you. But people keep asking, how's retirement? I go, I don't know. No idea. I haven't yet to experience it. We're out of the frying pan and into the fire. Not to mention the 2-week period of time when I didn't know if she was going to die or not. That was not very fun. So this situation with Adam is a bit of a straw breaking a camel's back, because there's been a lot of things going on. We had a death in the family, just getting used to not being here. There's been a lot, very arduous couple months. So, there's a koan too. Like, how does a broken-backed camel navigate? After the straw breaks the camel's back, then what? We never talk about that. Well, Stacy and I worked with a guy for many, 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 many years who has a broken back. You know about Mike's broken back? He broke his back many years ago. Not this Mike, different Mike. And it's not something that can be surgically repaired, and it's just never going to not be that way. His back is broken and he functions like a normal person. What's that?
And he's still able to take very long drives.
Right. And he drives and he plays basketball. He does all kinds of stuff. So what happens after the camel's back breaks is really the question. Can you function when your heart is broken? Of course you can. Can you keep putting energy into positive things, the things that matter to you, your family, your friends, your career, helping others, whatever? Of course you can. Of course. Of course. The fallacy is, my friend died, therefore, whatever, fill in the blank. I can't go to work today. I have to relapse because I can't stand the pain. There's no point to life because people just keep dying. Whatever. It's not true. None of that is true. What's true is, I feel super sad today. I want to put my energy, I want to put these 16 hours I have to play with to good use and try to make the world a little better today. We put so many walls up in our minds. Now, there's a flip side to this too. When my mom died a couple years ago, it affected the family members in very different ways. And I'm not here to say one is better than the other, but I've been observing, she was really the hub of the whole thing. She was technically my stepmother. Blended family, 5 kids from 3 different relationships, 3 different sets of parents, She was the hub. Some of us have leaned into the pain and some of us have tried to avoid the pain. And I'll just say that it's had different results for different people. So the opposite of what I'm saying is, my friend died. Well, what can you do? Life sucks. Anyway, let's just move on. We're not doing that either. This is what the Buddha taught, the middle way. We're all making space for it, but we're not canceling our lives either. That's what we do in our practice. That's what we do in our life. I'm going to die, yet right now I'm alive. My friend passed away, and yet we're here. We have something to do today that's important. My wife is going to live, and that's great, and we're both exhausted from what we've been through the last couple months. You guys understand what I'm saying? It's both. Paradox. Life is just one big paradox. And at the heart of that paradox is, I'm going to die, but I am alive. The fact that I'm going to die does not mean my life does not matter. It means that it matters more than anything. Mic drop. Thank you all very much. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
When you talk about Patrick, your father-in-law, and you said he died and he had a great life, part of what made it great is that he appreciated it. Someone could have had the same life and died feeling like they missed things or bad about various things. So some of it was his attitude,
True.
not just what he did. So your attitude is really
Absolutely.
important.
And my Zen Roshi used to say asa ni ko, which my Japanese is limited to what the Zen paraphernalia are called in Japanese and martial arts words. But from what I understand, asa ni ko means let us appreciate. And apparently he would say it all the time. It's hard to imagine that I could feel closer to someone that I never met than I do to my Zen Roshi. Because talk about a life that mattered. He had in Japan, the Zen temple is generally speaking, is a family business. So you grow up in a Zen temple and then you inherit the temple. And it's a pretty cushy life, pretty revered. You do weddings, you do funerals. Imagine if the Episcopal priesthood in this country was passed on from parent to child, that kind of thing. And he chose to come over here, much more arduous path, to help out with the Japanese Zen community in LA. But his real reason for coming was that he was not happy with the level of interest in Zen in Japan. He really he knew that Alan Watts had written his book and Zen was starting to become really interesting to people over here. He really wanted to see wonder what these Americans would do with the Dharma. Didn't speak a word of English. Legend has it that in order to get over here, he borrowed money from a Yakuza to get a one-way ticket on a ship. He must have paid the money back because I know he went back to Japan multiple times. He actually died there. But what a massive impact. He transmitted the Dharma to 12 American successors. And I trace my lineage through one of those lines, Jutsudo, whom I mentioned before. And there's hundreds of us now, if not thousands, of American Zen teachers in his lineage. Just because he came over and devoted his whole life to teaching us Gaijin, the Dharma. But he really emphasized appreciation. That was the word he used rather than gratitude. Appreciation. Those of us that are in recovery know that gratitude is what it's all about. You can train your mind to focus on what you're grateful for. And please understand that I am so grateful that Marina is okay. I mean, I can't even describe it, but it's also the rubber really meets the road in your practice when you're planning on one thing and then something else happens. I mean, we were on a trip when we got the call that the Mayo could see her because they had a cancellation. So instead of going to New York City to like hang out and see Broadway shows, as had been the plan for months after we retired from here, we instead said goodbye to our son that we'd been spending the week with where he lives and came back here and went to the Mayo, and she had her surgery. So both appreciating that she is okay and also acknowledging that I'm tired is important, because there are Zen people who are like, it is so. Yes. She is alive, and that is all that matters. I have no feelings about it. Well, that's lame. There are also recovery zombies who are, hey man, how's it going? I'm just so full of gratitude today. And you're like, I do not trust you any further than I can throw you. Because they're not being real. We've all encountered people like that. So for me, it's, can I be grateful and still be ambitious? Can I be grateful and still acknowledge the things I'm maybe not feeling so grateful about? Can I be grateful on a given day that I'm not feeling grateful for the awareness that I'm not grateful? Because if I'm having a day where I'm not grateful, I better watch what I say and do so I don't do a lot of damage. But yes, Patrick, his mom passed away when he was 9. He grew up in a war-torn country. You know, he was from the north, and for those of you that don't know your Irish history, they refer to it as the Troubles, which is like the most Irish thing to call it. But it was a war-torn country. And he had family in the IRA, and I mean, it was a whole whoop-de-doo. And he could have been like, well, my mom died, and I got kicked off the national soccer team, and I grew up in this war, and meh. But he did, you're right. He chose to really embrace life. He was such a bon vivant and such a, you know, one of the things that lives on with him gone that we say to each other all the time in my family is, hey, go for it. Hey, go for it. Kind of like what Molly said to me all those years ago. He was constantly telling stories that at the time, I don't know if we realized what he was doing, but he was trying to remind us that anything is possible. You know, it really is. Again, this room is proof of that. Other questions? So yes, appreciation, but don't let it become a trap. Don't let it become the only note in your piccolo. The only color in your paint box. That's boring. But yes, it's important. Other questions? Do you have any questions? Do you have a question? So I've been doing Zen for 29 years now, and I keep talking about my various teachers. So the teacher I had in Boulder that I lived with for many years, Dainin Roshi, he used to say at the end of a talk, if there's not a lot of questions, it either means you understood everything I said or nothing I said. Hopefully it's the first one. Thank you all very much. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Josh.